Welcome to today's webinar with AccuSteel. I'm Sam Paul, Editorial Director at Jeeps Media Group, and I'll be your host today. A little background on AccuSteel. They were founded in 1995 and are based in Audubon, Iowa. AccuSteel got its start with a goal to provide professionally engineered high-quality structures. With so many companies focusing on lower quality, high volume sales, AccuSteel recognized a need in the marketplace for a superior product and stepped in with a better solution. Today, AccuSteel is a trusted industry-leading manufacturer of premier high-quality fabric-covered buildings, all 100% made in the U.S. at their facility in Iowa. With a large network of dealers and preferred installers, they've built a strong reputation for reliability and long-term customer satisfaction. At the core of their business is a deep commitment to quality and always doing what's right for their customers. In this webinar, we'll explore how AccuSteel's flat storage buildings deliver year-round value by reducing labor and equipment costs, increasing operational flexibility, lowering long-term expenses, and optimizing storage ROI well beyond the harvest season. And now I'd like to introduce our presenter, Tony Holder. Tony is Director of Business Development at AccuSteel, and he works directly with folks across the ag industry to design and build fabric-covered storage solutions for grain, fertilizer, and bulk materials. Before we begin, I'd like to point out that questions for Tony can be entered at any time during the webinar by typing in the question box in the upper right of the screen. We will address your questions after the presentation. And now I'll turn it over to Tony.
Thank you, Samantha. Welcome, everybody, and good morning. And thank you all for being here today. And thank you, Grain Journal, for hosting this. This is going to be a brief overview on how our AccuSteel buildings can maximize your ROI in every season, not just during harvest. And like Sam said, as we go along this morning, please send in your questions. We'll have plenty of time at the end of this when I'm finished to answer all your questions. I'm going to start out today by talking about AccuSteel buildings multi-uses for our flat storage buildings outside of harvest. Some of the other uses for when you build a grain storage building, you obviously during the year you can store fertilizer, equipment, DDGs, feed ingredients, salt, ag lime, etc. When a lot of the grain buildings we build come in, as in the picture, with red prime steel. If you're 100% sure that you're only going to put in grain in non-corrosive items, that's fine. But we can always plan ahead that if you're not 100% sure and you're going to put salt or fertilizer, anything corrosive in there, we can always hot dip galvanize that steel to avoid corrosion. Some of the other things is the adaptability of our buildings throughout the year. For example, as we all know, the upper Midwest and some states and areas are having record yield bumps that we've never seen before. So they've been planning and building grain storage very rapidly over the last several years, excuse me. In some of the areas, the last couple of years, we all know too that we've had extreme droughts, extreme floods. So with some of that, they've been able to take advantage of flat storage buildings and taking advantage of some seasonal pricing strategies on fertilizer, ag lime, AMS, and other commodities. Also, with our buildings, the add-on flexibility for our buildings for capacity. Let's just say, as an example, you build a 2 million bushel flat storage building, and a couple years down the road, several years down the road, you wish you would have put up 4 million, or you expanded, yield bump, more corn acres, more soybean acres, what have you. We can very easily add on to the end of our building as long as there's footprint there. The width, no, but the length. So we can always expand capacity. And with our buildings, it's very simple. It's very easy to add on. And most of the time that can be done within a couple months. Next, I'm going to talk about labor and equipment and reallocation. So everybody here struggles with labor, I can only imagine. If you don't, you're very lucky. But that's the topic of everybody I talk to is how can we build this thing for less labor intense for people to be in the building, people to move the grains, empty the grains, several options. In these buildings versus a pile seems to be the next big topic on everybody's minds because, um, for example, our buildings versus the outside pile is we definitely will reduce time pulling compared to pulling the outside pile covers. We all know how that goes on and off. It takes a lot of people, a lot of time, and pulls them away from their other duties. Um, and as well as every year you're replacing or repairing those fabrics or covers, and that's that's can get to be very expensive. Also, compared to the outside, is people are ending up with a lot of spoilage, damage of the grain, hot spots. They're harder to control. The grain condition environment under those outside piles as well. And one of the other ones is the electricity costs for aeration and lighting on the outside piles versus ours versus the flat storage building, fabric building. And then as well as putting guys on those piles, covering them, pulling them, taking them on and off, keeping it covered while you're emptying it. It's a lot of time, a lot of manual labor, and there's a lot of risk for safety and other hazardous and strenuous situations with them handling those tarps. And as well as the outside, some of those are going to have sweeps, um, backs, and whatnot. When you get into the flat storage buildings, you can eliminate that. Some guys are still wanting to do center pivot sweeps in our concrete buildings, and that's fine. You eliminate a lot of risk when you don't have the sweeps. Um, and next, we're gonna talk about how we work with you, the customer, on designing the building. And what we do as AccuSteel is we do not and will not force you into a cookie cutter building. We customize every building to fit your needs and wants based on your site, your goals, and your operation. Yes, everybody can start with, let's say the cookie cutter style. If you want 2 million or 3 million or 4 million bushels, we can tell you pretty close to how much that's going to cost you per bushel. But what we're willing to do is we'll customize off of that, um, up or down. We can remove, add things. A big thing today is some of the things that in-floor reclamation, in-floor aeration. Some of those options, they're very, very nice and eliminates labor. In some cases, depending on the width of the building, we can take out 60-70% of the corn before you have to put a loader in there. So that's a huge deal, but it comes at a cost. So, if you don't think you need in-floor aeration, we can always go with the old tube style. That's not a problem. In-floor reclamation can be customized to any length. It can be center, it can be off to the side. You can go halfway, put a pit in the middle so you can push everything to it. We'll do, like we say, we'll do anything to your needs and wants, and we sit down with you one on one and figure out your operation and your needs, and not ours. We want to build it so it fits everything that you need. And along with that, we have an extensive dealer network across the entire U.S., and as well as many pre-qualified and preferred installation contractors. And we vet every contractor that deals with us. Um, and with that being said, is we're across the United States. We're not going to know all the concrete guys, all the dirt work guys. And when we're dealing with these grain specific buildings, we always ask the end customer is, do you have somebody local? Because most of you guys you're already working with a millwright, a, a concrete guy, um, and maybe even an installer for our building. So as long as they have the manpower and equipment and knowledge to do it, we're willing to work with a local guy. Next is the longevity and durability. We always get asked about the fabric. The myth is they're flimsy. It's not as tough as steel, as durable, as long lasting. Well, that's what it is. It's a myth. Fabric buildings, um, I don't know if how many of you know this, but they must be and are engineered to IBC codes, just like any steel building. Um, we have to we have to play we have to obey by the rules, the IBC codes by county, and we go by snow, wind loads by either county or city, and that's it just depends on where you live and your county codes and your city expectations. Um, our buildings are built to withstand up to 150-mile-an-hour winds. People always get asked if we can build one in hurricane environments to the south. We can, and with any fabric building, the way we get around that in most cases is pull the covers and put them back on, just like battening up your roofs. We don't have to deal with that much. But as far as grain buildings in the Midwest and throughout the country, it's wind and snow loads. So, and what that means is on our buildings in particular is if there's a snow load, it, let's just say it's 30 or 40. What that means to us is we have to narrow the truss in. So instead of maybe putting on 20-foot centers or 16-foot centers, we may be down in some cases when you get up into North Dakota and Minnesota and Wisconsin where there's heavy snow, is we may be down to all the way to 4 or 6 foot center truss. And that creates a larger cost, obviously, but it's doable. As far as the flimsy is what some people refer to. If you're not familiar with our buildings, the fabric has come a long ways in 30 years since these buildings came around. And for example, the industry standard, or above the standard, I should say, is what we use actually is a 12-ounce polyethylene fabric, and that comes with a 20-year warranty. And now the industry has another product out. It's in a 5-year process, and it's just now come out, and it's an elite fabric, and it's 13.8-ounce polyethylene fabric, and that comes with a 25-year warranty. We also offer a flame retardant and a PVC fabric as well. The flame retardant is becoming a big deal in certain states and certain counties with fires. Um, but overall, the polyethylene fabrics are very durable. In most cases, they're more durable than steel. They can withstand hail. And and with that being said, is we offer an individual keeter panel. So an individual keeter panel is every truss will have a keeter track on it. And so let's just say, for example, the 20-foot center truss, every truss will have a keeter track on it. That means every 20 foot, you're going to have a panel instead of a full one single panel mono cover or a hybrid or a sectional. So it what that does is for repair and maintenance, as we all know through this year, we've had tornadoes, storms, derechos, or you have an employee that gets a little careless and backs in or rips or tears part of the fabric. You're not spending, in some cases, $50,000 to $100,000 replacing a whole cover. Where if you have an individual Keeters, you're only replacing that panel or two panels. Where we've had instances where wind has caught something, ripped the corner, ripped a couple of panels, and we're going in there in a matter of weeks, just pulling off and repairing a couple panels. And we can come in there, repair them, patch them until we get the new fabric in there in a couple of weeks and cover it. And that's kind of a big deal because you guys, you're in some of these cases, you have you know, 2 million bushels of corn sitting in there and you have part of it ripped off. It's a heck of a lot quicker and faster to come in there and less expensive to just repair a couple of panels. And we get your grain covered up. That's your bigger worry than the couple $1,000s worth of panels is your $1 million worth of grain sitting in there in the corner. Um, so along with our buildings, some of the operational features for grain handling and grain conditioning is the ventilation system. Get asked a lot is because on our buildings, some of the key features is natural light, and the natural airflow. The way we design these buildings and the way they're designed is with ventilation and natural light and natural airflow. So we can do a lot of things with ventilation. We'll start with the wall vents. We can put any kind of wall vents in, and we can go as simple as the mesh vents that are right into the fabric, the end wall. Louvered vents. We can put electric fans. Um, Anything you want in there in any size. We can build that, customize it for whatever you want. Eave ventilation on the eaves underneath, just like on your home. We can have that come out, and we have the ventilation and eaves throughout the system or throughout the whole wall. In-floor aeration tunnels, that's becoming a huge deal now, just from replacing either the steel tubes or the plastic poly tubes. Um, that we can do several ways. We have a company we work with precast, so you don't have to form every one of them. Some of these buildings we're getting 400, 800 feet long. That's a lot. That's a lot of tubes. That's a lot of tunnels to form. So coming in with a precast company where they bring the tunnels already precasted, they come in, they lay them in, so the concrete guy doesn't have to spend all that time and labor forming up each tunnel. And like I say, we still have that option because there is an expense. We can do the above ground aeration as well. Same way with reclamation that I talked about earlier. In-floor reclaim is becoming obviously a huge deal with these, so they don't have to use loaders and dump into semis, or however you do it with an old uni loader style or whatever. They're nice, they're convenient. But this, like I said, in some cases, depending on the width of your building, we can get 60 to 70% of the corn out of that building, keep the grain moving, and eliminate labor in the loader system inside the building. The natural light, I kind of touched on that before, but it's a bigger deal than people realize. It's very nice when you go in that building, you don't have to have lights all during the day. And then even at night or in the early mornings when you're working in there, you don't have to have 100 lights across the building. Some of these cases, we've walked into buildings that are 400 feet long, and they'll have 5 LED lights up there, and it's brighter than one imagines. Even excuse me, even at night with a full moon or a moon, it's still like it is outside. And not only that, that is really convenient and really nice. Saves on your electricity for sure, but it also reduces spoilage and improves overall grain conditioning. And as we all know, the old um, steel buildings, and we put the grain in there, dark, dingy corners, creates mold, spoilage, and whatever, and probably a lot more critters around than in the light. So just keep that in mind that it's not just the light and the electricity savings, but it's also the spoilage. So um, now here, before we get to the end, I'd like to share a couple examples of buildings that we've done um, outside of what we can do with new buildings. And we've had a couple instances, quite a few actually, in this past year. The first one's down in Dalhart, Texas. That one is, we put that one up on the original concrete foundation that's there. It was destroyed. I don't remember quite how, but it was damaged beyond repair. And so we could come in there and we just utilized the old foundations there, put up a building. And um, where I'm going with this is we don't necessarily have to replace everything. We can customize our building to the widths and lengths that is already there. And that's a big convenience because it saves you on all of the concrete, any new concrete work. And again, it's time on rebuild for if we have it in stock, versus customizing it. And excuse me, is we can get that done in sometimes in weeks, but definitely within a couple months. We can have you a new building uh, up and available. The second one is a really unique situation in Sydney, Illinois for Premier Co-op. Um, that original building was destroyed in the derecho, and we know how the damage that caused with everybody, whether you had fabric buildings, steel buildings, or grain bins. What we did here was we worked with the engineers, and they were to the point of going to bulldoze all that concrete down and start over. And we came in, our engineer came in, worked with them and designed it so they could put the pillars inside the concrete, and we put that building on top of it. Uh, that pretty much saved a company from, the cost alone of just jackhammering that all out there, having to get rid of it, all the labor expense, and then probably near $4 million worth of concrete. That saved them from doing a whole new greenfield site and putting the building over top. So those are just a couple examples of what we can do outside of being a new building. So you guys, with some of the weather that's been gone, we're getting calls, every day to replace um, all sizes and all different kinds of buildings. So uh, that's definitely an option. And that one in particular, and a couple more we're working on, it damaged the building, but it didn't damage the grain handling equipment, the overhead conveyors, the legs and such. We can work around that. And this particular one is what we call our crossover style. So I call it the I-beam style, as you can see in the bottom picture. We have open web truss and we have the I-beam style. And not too many companies, only one other one can do that I-beam style on a fabric building, where we can customize that to any slope, any height to get over your existing uh, grain hand grain handling leg at the top, drag at the top of your building, conveyor, drag, whatever you're using for a system. So, like I said, we can customize around everything. And this one's a great example too for the eave ventilation, as you can see where it comes out. I think that's 4 or 6 feet. Underneath there, we can leave it open, or we can put a faucet, a fascia underneath there with vents along the system. And I believe those are mesh vents in the top of those buildings. I know I probably ran through that all pretty quick, but that was just to give you an overview. Um, I just want to summarize, in what I touched base on is the flexibility, cost savings, adaptability, the resilience, and convenience of our buildings. And like I said earlier, we design these buildings for you, your operations, and what you need. And we'll meet you where you are, and we'll build it for you. Um, and I offer it out to each and every one of you. You'll have my information, contact information, to please give me a call. It doesn't cost you anything for a free consultation. And I'd love to sit down with you. Love to learn more about your guys' companies, your operations, and what you need, and see if we can help you out with your situation and your grain storage today. And I thank you again, and I'm going to turn it back over to Samantha, and they'll open it up for the questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. It's now time for the Q&A session, and you can still enter questions in the box in the upper right of the screen. All right. First question. Do you have an example of a customer who reduced labor needs, and what did that look like for them?
Um, yeah, pretty much most of our customers, we're getting a lot of um, interest and calls, and current customers we're working with for outside storage piles. Um, let's just say they're tired of it. They don't have the labor staff to handle, let's just call them tarps, covers, to pull them outside piles. It takes a lot of people, a lot of time to set up the aeration and put it into that's where I would say our biggest um, questions are and concerns from customers is they they understand after talking about our buildings and what we can do versus that outside pile. You're not messing with the piles anymore. In some cases, people are taking me. They have to shut down. Example, um, a fuel ethanol plant has an outside storage pile of 1.5 million bushels, 2 million bushels, somewhere in there, and it takes them 25 people. And so they basically have to shut down for a day or two to deal with those to get them covered. So um, it's teach one of your operations on how many it takes to pull that back. But when you're going inside a building, you basically, these buildings, one person emptying them can handle it. I've seen it, where they have one or two load payloaders and they're pushing it to an in-floor reclaim, or even have, um, I call it a uniloader style, where the machine pulls in with a conveyor and a guy sits there and loads a semi. So you're talking a guy in the semi and a guy in the loader. And I know you can do that on the piles as well. But if you're doing it with a reclaim, you're removing a lot of risk. That truck is being loaded outside. That reclaim pit goes out to the leg, goes up, and usually most of our customers have two overhead bins. So if you're putting 2,500 or 3,000 bent two up there, that semi driver can come in there. He loads his own and moves out. They shut off. Um, that reclaim will shut off when they're full. So we can do anything with any of the systems, but that's the biggest one I see compared to the outside piles. I think you're muted, Sam.
Thank you.
No worries. No worries.
All right, another question we have here is where are the precast ventilations made?
So we use Hanson panels out of Minnesota. It's I think it's Lake Lillian. I don't know the name for sure, but they're the ones that do it, and it's a pretty easy system. Um, Obviously, they precast them, they hull them down, and they install them where needed to be. So, and that's the only company that I know of today who we work with.
Okay, next question. Regarding the amount of concrete in a building versus a bin. Um,
Well, concrete and versus a band versus ours. Everybody, you have to go by the geotech report on the soils, and that can vary. I'm just going to say most generally on our buildings, for the footings on the outside walls, in the upper Midwest, most cases it's a 4 foot. We just have to get down to the frost level. But in some cases, if the geotech report comes back, I mean, we can have to go down up to 20 feet, and that's a huge expense. Our floors, most of them, most of them are 6 or 8 inches. In extreme cases, we've had to maybe go up to 10 or 12, but the majority, if not 90% of them, are 6 to 8 inches. Grain bins, I'm not too familiar with. I just know it's deep, and that all based on the weight that's going to have to go upon that. Where on flat storage, we can spread that out, whereas a grain bin, you're very limited. That's obviously a vertical situation where you're putting massive amounts of grain on top of a small cylinder of concrete. Um, so I hope I answered that correct. It's a little bit different.
Are there any good rules of thumb for budgeting purposes on a square foot basis for different types of storage?
No, each one's it's obviously it's kind of a lot easier on grain because we can get you in that ballpark a lot easier by how much per bushel. Square footage is a little bit different on, let's just say, well, open storage is probably the easiest, obviously, without any equipment. And in the grain, pretty much once you get above that, 1 to 4 million, we pretty much can get near a set per bushel price. But when you're talking about fertilizer, because that's our next big common one, that's tough for square foot just because of the difference of equipment, the difference in sizes of bins you want to put in there. You're dealing with a lot of different parameters, I would say, on a fertilizer building. It comes down to you're getting into pretty much a customized. The more customized we do in the equipment you throw into a building, makes it a little bit more difficult. Our building alone, yes. Our building alone and installation alone, yes. That's relatively the easiest part of the project, and Most of the time, our building and installation is 10 to 15% of an overall project on a full grain facility or a full fertilizer facility. I hope that helps.
Another question says, after a building is completed and used for a year or two, what do buyers wish they would have done during initial construction?
Almost 100% of everybody that builds any of our buildings or any building period wish they would have built that for somebody else and then built their own. But it's little things. It isn't the big things. It's a knee wall here or a wall here or a door here. And those are the simple things. Nothing really major when they get around to it. But I think as you go through the process of building anything, um, everybody is the same way with a house. You wish you would have done some things differently. Overall project, nothing major. It's usually just the little things.
Wouldn't storing grain and fertilizer in the same building create a higher corrosion risk, and how do you mitigate that?
So you got to pre-plan, obviously. And I always ask the customer when we're dealing with grain is, are you sure 100% you're never going to put anything in there that's corrosive? And an example goes back to, so on all of our open web truss systems buildings, those are all 100% hot dipped galvanized. So not an issue when we're talking open web truss buildings. It's and I'm going to explain the hot dip galvanization because I always say it's 100%. Um, Unlike most of our customers, we in-house, we bring in all the raw material. We have a manufacturing facility in Audubon, Iowa today still. We bring all the raw material in there. We customize to each building, make all our bends, weld on all our brackets, all the cuts, everything. When that truss is done and ready for your building, we ship it to the galvanization facility and they hot dip it. So a lot of our competitors are bringing in the open web truss systems, then they're already galvanized and they're putting on they're bending them, doing the cuts, doing the welds, putting the brackets on, then they're spray painting a galvanization on there, which is fine, but it only lasts you a couple years and you have to maintenance it, get up there and spray it. So spraying on is not like hot dip galvanizing it. So we get into our crossover series where it's the I-beam, um, our I-beam building back in the picture where it's red primed paint. That's great. Saves you a lot of money if you're going 100% grain or non-corrosive in there. And I always ask our customers, are you sure? And is dealing with co-ops, it's different when it's a ethanol plant where they're only going to deal with grain, right? That's fine. But when you're dealing with a co-op and with the fluctuation of climates and things like that, in a lot of these buildings, you're filling to fill fast to keep your farmers moving and the grain moving in the fall, and then usually throughout the winter or early spring, you're emptying them buildings and they sit from spring to fall empty. Well, you can utilize those and take advantage of, like I said, fertilizer. Uh, Fertilizer, AMS seems to be a big deal right now. Salt, what have you, that's corrosive. So if you know that, we spend a little extra money and galvanize galvanized our crossover I-beam. And I highly recommend that if you're a business that handles more than just grain.
Could you talk a little bit more about how natural light can help reduce spoilage?
Yeah, it's like I said earlier, it's the difference between light and dark, right? Because in a steel building or a wood building, you have dark, dingy corners and builds up moisture. Um, Mold and mildew love that, as we all know. Where you have the natural light, you're still going to have um, the natural light just like out in day. You're going to have the heat, and and also that helps our natural light is our natural airflow. So it's I guess it's as simple as it is it's natural lighting versus the cold, dark, dingy.
What are the most common secondary uses you've seen for these buildings and some off-season uses?
I hit it a couple times. Is the Fertilizer with the grain, it seems to be fertilizer. Um, uh, yeah, it's the fertilizer. Either it's micros or macros. Some guys use it as equipment. Another one's a big one is equipment. When you're doing grain, just storing their equipment in there and keeping it out of the weather and the wind. Um, those are the two biggest ones I see. Some people they deal they might deal with some salt, or I've even seen sand and dirt put in some of these piles, or storage of some of their seed, pallets of seed. But the two biggest ones, as far as we're dealing with grain, is fertilizer.
Another question is, how often does AccuSteel build on existing foundations?
It's becoming quite often in all sizes and shapes of buildings. It seems to be the smaller ones, but the two examples I've given you, those are just two. We're currently working on a bunch of them as we speak. It just seems like with the weather we've been having, and as well as the question hasn't been asked yet, but I told you the warranty on these fabrics and buildings, but also this business started 30 years, around 30 years ago, fabric buildings. Coverall was probably one of the first, and they're no longer around. But some of them buildings, um, they're getting to their life expectancy. I don't think anybody realized when they were putting those up that the life expectancy of the building was going to be that long. And people ask me all the time, and I said, I don't think we really know. Obviously, we're putting a 20 and 25-year warranty on this stuff, and we just don't know. We have buildings that are just fine that we put up, that AccuSteel's put up, 20, 25 years ago. And we're not replacing a lot of those because they're worn out. We're replacing them because they got damaged in some fashion or form. And to be honest, a lot of these buildings we're going in, we're just doing recovers. The steel is all fine. But I think over the next 5 to 10 years, we may see some of this stuff that starts to um, um, just degrade or hits their life expectancy, but we're not seeing it as of right now.
So the Keter system helps with maintenance. Does it speed up repairs?
Oh, definitely, definitely. Compared to order a panel piece in versus ordering a larger cover, and as well as we can just simply unhook those, pull them out, put the new one in, and pull it back over. Um, the time saving is tremendous versus going in and replacing the full cover or a hybrid cover, and manufacturing time as well. To make a 20 foot by 180 foot, let's just say over and a top, would is going to be at the manufacturing facility is going to be a lot faster than doing a 200 foot, or well, let's just say an 80 foot piece, 140 over. So yes.
And one last question. What is the expected lifespan of the fabric, and how often does it usually need to be replaced?
That's kind of what I just answered, but we don't know exactly. But we always tell everybody, 25, 30 years is what, obviously with the warranty, that's what the fabric manufacturers' expectations are. Um, but I'd say we just don't know. And I don't want to say it's any longer than that. But like I said, we're seeing a lot of them that are 20 to 25 years old. That an example, we just replaced one for Simplot out in Illinois, and we replaced one. I think it's 14 foot wide, and it was a Keter track. We replaced it. All the rest of it's got the green and gray mold on it from over the years, and we put this bright, light new section on the end of it. It looks a little different. They don't care. It's protecting it, but it's if you want to spend the time to get up there and power wash it, it's fine, and it would handle it. But that thing was 19 years old, and the only reason that got hit by a piece and ripped it across from Keter to Keter, and we couldn't patch it. Otherwise, the fabric was fine.
All right. Well, that concludes our Q&A session. Everyone who registered for the webinar, including those not in attendance, will receive an email with a link to the webinar recording. And any questions that Tony did not get a chance to answer can be answered by email. I'd like to thank Tony Holder and AccuSteel for the informative presentation today. Thank you all for attending this Jeeps Media Group webinar and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks.